The air in Manhattan was thick with the pulse of a late summer night, a tapestry of neon lights and restless dreams woven into the city's heartbeat. Lyra, a black woman from Brooklyn, whose eyes held the depth of 1,000 untold stories, stood at the edge of the Flatiron District's most exclusive rooftop bar, the Starlit Haven. Her auburn curls framed her face, catching the golden glow of the skyline as she clutched a glass of bourbon, its amber hue mirroring the fire in her chest. She was here to drown a sorrow, to let the city's chaos swallow the ache of a love recently lost. Her ex, a charming but faithless poet, had left her heart in fragments, and tonight she sought solace in the rhythm of strangers and the blur of alcohol. Across the crowded terrace, Thunder, a white man with a jawline sharp enough to cut through the city's haze, leaned against the bar. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, not with the arrogance of his privileged upbringing in Connecticut, but with a quiet restlessness. A tech entrepreneur by trade, he was nursing his own wounds, a betrayal by a fiancé who had traded his devotion for another's wealth. The bourbon in his hand was his third each sip, a futile attempt to dull the sting. His tailored suit, slightly unbuttoned at the collar, hinted at a man unraveling, yet his presence commanded attention, a magnetic pull that drew eyes without effort. Their paths converged at the bar's edge, where the music, a sultry jazz number, wove its spell. Lyra, emboldened by the liquor, swayed lightly to the rhythm, her silk dress clinging to her curves like a lover's whisper. Thunder noticed her first, captivated by how her fleeting laughter seemed to light up the night. He approached, his voice low and warm, like a melody meant only for her. "Mind if I join you in pretending the world doesn't exist tonight?" he asked, his smile both disarming and sincere. Lyra turned her gaze sharp but curious, assessing him. "Only if you're good at pretending," she replied, her voice carrying the cadence of Brooklyn, rich and unapologetic. They clinked glasses, a silent pact to escape their respective ghosts. The conversation flowed effortlessly, banter about the city's quirks, shared disdain for pretentious art galleries, and confessions of dreams they'd buried under the weight of heartbreak. Lyra spoke of her ambition to open a boutique for handmade crafts, her hands animated as she described the textures of her creations. Thunder shared tales of his startup days, his voice softening when he mentioned his mother's garden in Greenwich, a sanctuary he missed. As the night deepened, so did their connection. The bourbon loosened their tongues, and the space between them shrank. Lyra's laughter grew freer. Thunder's touches, light brushes against her arm, more intentional. The bar's lights dimmed, and the crowd faded into a blur. They danced, her head resting briefly against his chest, his heartbeat a steady drum against the night's chaos. It was a moment stolen from time, a fleeting intimacy born of shared vulnerability. But the bourbon betrayed them. One drink became 3, then 5, until the world spun in a kaleidoscope of lights and sounds. Lyra's memory blurred as they stumbled out of the bar, her arm looped through his, their laughter echoing down Fifth Avenue. Equally lost in the haze, Thunder hailed a cab, his only thought to ensure she was safe. The destination was unclear. Her apartment in Brooklyn was too far, and his penthouse in Tribeca was too personal. Instead, they ended up at the Luminary, a boutique hotel in Flatiron, its opulent lobby, a fleeting backdrop, as they staggered to a room driven by a reckless desire neither could name. Morning broke with a cruel clarity. Lyra awoke in a tangle of silk sheets, her head pounding her body, aching in places she couldn't explain. The room was a study in luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing the Manhattan skyline, a crystal chandelier casting prisms across the walls, but it felt alien wrong. She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest, her breath catching as she realized she was bare beneath it. Her clothes lay scattered across the floor, a silent accusation of the night's indiscretions. Panic clawed at her throat as she pieced together fragments of the evening, his voice, His touch, the way the world had seemed to pause when he looked at her. Beside her, Thunder stirred his blonde hair, disheveled, his eyes bleary, as he registered her presence. "Where am I?" Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with confusion and shame. She pressed a hand to her temple, wincing at the pain. Why does everything hurt? Thunder sat up, his shock mirroring hers as he noticed his lack of attire. "What the hell happened?" he muttered, his voice rough with sleep and regret. Their eyes met, a storm of accusation and bewilderment passing between them. Lyra's voice rose sharp with indignation. "What did you do to me? Why am I here in your room like this?" Thunder's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the sheet as he shook his head. "My room? I don't even know how we got here. You think I planned this?" His tone was defensive, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of guilt. "You were the one who kissed me first, Lyra. Please don't put this on me." Her cheeks burned at the accusation, memories flickering like a faulty reel. Her lips on his, the heat of his hands, the reckless abandon of the moment. "You're lying," she snapped, though doubt gnawed at her. "I'd never. I was drunk, okay? We both were." She pointed at him, her finger trembling. "You should have stopped it." Thunder's gaze softened, though his words were firm. "I tried to get you home, but you wouldn't tell me where you lived. I brought you here to keep you safe, not to whatever this was." He gestured to the room, the evidence of their night strewn across it. "I was just as gone as you were." The air grew heavy with their shared regret. Lyra's hands shook as she gathered her clothes, her movements jerky, her heart tangled with anger and humiliation. Thunder watched, his expression a mix of frustration and something softer, almost tender. "Look, I'm not that guy," he said quietly. "I don't do this random nights, no strings. I was messed up last night, and you were the same. My fiancé left me for someone else, and I just lost it." Lyra paused, her dress clutched to her chest, his confession catching her off guard. "You think that makes this okay?" she asked, her voice softer now, laced with her own pain. "I just got out of something too. That's why I was there, drowning my sorrows. But this," she gestured between them, "this wasn't supposed to happen." They dressed in silence, the weight of their actions pressing down like the city's skyline outside. Thunder pulled a business card from his wallet. His name, Thunder James, Whitmore, etched in sleek font alongside a phone number. "If you need to talk or anything," he said, holding it out. "I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, Lyra." She hesitated, then took the card, her fingers brushing his for a fleeting moment. "I don't even know you," she murmured. But the card felt like a lifeline, a tether to the man who had for one night made her forget her pain. Without another word, she fled the room, the click of the door behind her echoing like a final note in a song she wasn't ready to finish. Back in Brooklyn, Lyra collapsed onto her couch, the card clutched in her hand. The city buzzed outside her window, but inside her world was silent, save for the echo of her heartbeat. She replayed the night, the laughter, the dance, the way Thunder's eyes had held hers like she was the only person in the room. But those moments were tainted now, overshadowed by the consequences of their recklessness. She tossed the card onto the coffee table, vowing to forget. But a part of her, the part that still felt the ghost of his touch, knew forgetting wouldn't be so simple. The autumn air in Brooklyn carried a crisp edge, a reminder that time moved forward, even when Lyra's heart felt anchored to that reckless night in Manhattan. 2 months had passed since her encounter with Thunder, and the memory of his blue eyes and fleeting sincerity lingered like a melody she couldn't shake. Now back in her modest apartment in Bed-Stuy, Lyra threw herself into her work at a cozy bookstore in Williamsburg, where the scent of aged paper and fresh coffee offered a quiet refuge. But beneath her composed exterior, a storm was brewing, that would change her life forever. It began with a persistent nausea, a fatigue that clung to her like a second skin. At first, she blamed the late nights spent sketching designs for her dream boutique, her fingers tracing patterns that spoke of her bold, vibrant, unapologetic heritage. But when the symptoms refused to relent, she booked an appointment at Mount Sinai Hospital, her heart heavy with a suspicion she dared not voice. The doctor's words, delivered with clinical calm, hit her like a tidal wave. "You're pregnant, Ms. Thompson, with triplets." Lyra sat frozen, the sterile room closing in around her. Triplets. 3 lives growing within her, resulted from a single night she could barely recall. Her mind flashed to Thunder, his disheveled hair, his earnest plea for her to call him. But the thought of reaching out filled her with dread. She had tried dialing the number on his card once, but the line rang endlessly, a void where answers should have been. She felt abandoned not just by him, but by the version of herself that had danced so freely under the Manhattan stars. Back in her apartment, Lyra curled up on her couch, the weight of her reality pressing down. She thought of her mother Evelyn, a formidable woman in Harlem, whose strict upbringing had instilled strength and fear in Lyra. Evelyn's disapproval was a specter Lyra couldn't face, not yet. The thought of her mother's sharp tongue and her lectures about respectability and responsibility made Lyra's stomach churn more than the pregnancy itself. Instead, she turned to the one person who had always been her anchor, Joyce, her best friend since their days at Brooklyn Technical High School. Joyce lived in a warm, bustling home in Queens with her parents, a middle-class family, whose open hearts contrasted sharply with Evelyn's rigidity. When Lyra arrived at their doorstep, her eyes red from unshed tears, Joyce didn't hesitate. "You're staying here," she declared, her voice firm, yet gentle, pulling Lyra into a hug that smelled of lavender and home. Over cups of chamomile tea in the cozy kitchen, Lyra poured out her story. The bar, the bourbon, the man whose name felt like a storm. Joyce listened, her brown eyes wide with shock, but free of judgment, her hand steady on Lyra's. Joyce said, "You're not alone in this," her voice a lifeline. "Mom and Dad will love you like they love me. We'll figure this out together." And so, Lyra moved into the spare room in Queens. Her belongings, a modest collection of sketchbooks, clothes, and the business card she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Joyce's parents, Marla and David, welcomed her with open arms, their warmth a balm to her fractured spirit. Marla, a schoolteacher with a penchant for baking, insisted on making Lyra's favorite sweet potato pie. At the same time, a retired mechanic, David, offered quiet words of encouragement, his presence steady as oak. As the weeks turned into months, Lyra's body began to change her curves, softening her belly, rounding with the promise of life. She continued her job at the bookstore, her shifts a mix of shelving novels and sketching designs and stolen moments. But the nights were harder when the silence of the guest room left her alone with her thoughts. She began keeping a journal, its pages filled with confessions she couldn't speak aloud. "I'm scared," she wrote one night, her pen trembling. "Afraid of being a mother, scared of doing this alone, scared that I'll never be enough for them." The them were her unborn children, 3 souls she already loved fiercely, even as she feared the world they'd enter. Joyce became her confidant, her partner in navigating the uncertainties. They spent evenings planning, researching prenatal care, budgeting for baby supplies, dreaming up names that felt like blessings. Leo for strength, Lyndon for wisdom, Lorenzo for hope. Lyra clung to these names, whispering them like a prayer, a way to anchor herself to the future. But the shadow of Thunder lingered, his absence a quiet ache. She tried his number again, late one night, when the weight of her choices felt unbearable. But the call went unanswered, the silence confirming her fears. She was truly alone. Marla noticed Lyra's quiet moments. Her gaze drifted to the window, as if searching for something or someone. One evening, as they folded laundry together, Marla spoke softly. You don't have to tell your mom yet, Lyra. But you can't carry this alone forever. Those babies deserve a family, and you deserve to be seen. Lyra knotted her throat tight, but the fear of her mother's judgment held her back. Evelyn had raised her to be strong, to rise above the stereotypes that dogged black women in a city that could be both cruel and kind. To admit this mistake felt like betraying that legacy. Yet in Queens, Lyra found a different kind of family. David taught her how to fix a leaky faucet, and his patience silently affirmed her worth. Joyce dragged her to prenatal yoga classes in Flushing, their laughter echoing through the studio as they fumbled through poses. Small but profound moments stitched together the pieces of Lyra's heart, reminding her that love could be found in unexpected places. She began to dream again, not just of survival, but of thriving, of a boutique filled with her designs, of a home where her children would know joy. One crisp October evening, as the leaves turned gold outside the Queen's brownstone, Lyra sat on the porch, her journal open in her lap. The city hummed in the distance, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. She traced the edges of Thunder's business card, its corners worn from her touch. "Who are you, Thunder?" "Whitmore," she whispered to the night. "And why do I still want to know?" The stars above offered no answers, but Lyra found a flicker of resolve in their silence. She would build a life for her children with or without him, and in that act, she would reclaim the woman she was meant to be. The streets of Brooklyn hummed with a quiet resilience, their rhythm a mirror to Lyra Thompson's heartbeat as she carved out a new life in the wake of her world-altering discovery. 3 months had passed since the doctor's words at Mount Sinai had reshaped her future. She was carrying triplets, 3 fragile lives, born from a fleeting night with a man whose name still stirred a tempest in her soul: Thunder James Whitmore. In the cozy guest room of Joyce's family brownstone in Queens, Lyra found a sanctuary where the city's clamor softened to a whisper, allowing her to gather the pieces of herself she feared had been lost. Lyra's days were a delicate dance of routine and reinvention. By morning, she worked at the Bound Page, a Williamsburg bookstore, where the scent of aged leather and fresh ink offered a quiet solace. Her hands, once accustomed to sketching bold designs for her dream boutique, now arranged novels on oak shelves, each book a reminder of stories she longed to write for herself. By afternoon, she retreated to a corner table. Her sketchbook open, her pencil tracing patterns, inspired by her heritage swirls of kente cloth, motifs of Harlem's vibrant history. These designs were her rebellion against despair, a promise to the children growing within her that she would build a world worthy of their dreams. Her body was transforming a canvas of creation that both awed and unnerved her. Her once slim waist now curved with the gentle swell of life, her auburn curls framing a face that glowed with a quiet strength. Yet beneath this radiance, Lyra wrestled with shadows. As the Queen's brownstone settled into silence each night, she sat by the window, her journal a confidant for the fears she couldn't voice. "I see you in my dreams, little ones," she wrote, her pen trembling. "Leo, Lyndon, Lorenzo. I chose your names to carry strength, wisdom, and hope. But what if I'm not enough? What if this city swallows us whole with its sharp edges?" Joyce, her best friend since their teenage years at Brooklyn Tech, was her anchor in this storm. Joyce transformed the mundane into light moments with her infectious laugh and unyielding loyalty. On weekends, they wandered the farmer's market in Flushing. Joyce, insisting on buying organic apples for Lyra's cravings, their banter a melody of sisterhood. Joyce teased, "You're growing a whole squad in there," tossing an apple into their basket. "Better start practicing your coach voice." Lyra laughed, the sound rare and precious, a reminder that joy could still find her. Joyce's parents, Marla and David, enveloped Lyra in a warmth that felt like home. With her schoolteacher's patience, Marla taught Lyra to knit tiny booties, her hands guiding Lyra's through loops of soft yarn. Ever the storyteller, David regaled her with tales of his days as a mechanic, his voice a steady cadence that eased her anxieties. Their acceptance was a gift Lyra hadn't dared hope, for a stark contrast to the specter of her mother Evelyn, whose disapproval loomed large in Harlem. Lyra had yet to tell Evelyn about her pregnancy, the fear of her mother's judgment, a weight heavier than the lives she carried. One evening, as autumn painted queens in hues of amber and crimson, Lyra sat with Marla in the kitchen, the scent of sweet potato pie filling the air. Marla's eyes, kind but perceptive, studied Lyra's quiet demeanor. "You're carrying a lot, aren't you, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice soft as the dough she kneaded. Lyra nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "It's not just the babies," she admitted. "It's the wondering what they'll ask about their father, what I'll say when they do." Marla reached across the table, her hand warm against Lyra's. "You don't have to have all the answers now. Those babies will know love because of you. And if that man Thunder ever shows up, you'll decide what's best. You're stronger than you know." Lyra's eyes stung. Marla's words were a balm to her fractured confidence. She thought of Thunder's business card tucked in her journal, like a secret she couldn't release. She had tried calling again late one night, when the loneliness felt unbearable, but the unanswered ring only deepened her resolve to move forward alone. At the bookstore, Lyra found unexpected allies. Her co-worker, Amara, a poet with a penchant for bold lipstick, noticed Lyra's sketches and encouraged her to sell them online. "You've got a gift," Lyra, Amara said, peering over her shoulder at a design of interlocking spirals. "Etsy's calling your name." Hesitant but inspired, Lyra created a shop. Lyra's loom uploading her designs, scarves, prints, and woven wall hangings that blended African patterns with urban flair. To her surprise, orders trickled in each sale, a spark of hope, a step toward independence. Yet, the nights remained her battleground. Lyra poured out her heart in her journal, her words a tapestry of longing and determination. "I saw a father in the park today, pushing his daughter on a swing," she wrote. "Her laughter was so pure, and I wondered if you'll laugh like that, my boys. I want to give you that joy, but I'm terrified I'll fail. Thunder's name haunts me, not because I like him, but because I don't know if I can forgive him for not being here." Writing grounded her a ritual that transformed fear into purpose. One crisp November morning, as Lyra walked to the bookstore, the city seemed to pulse with possibility. A street musician's saxophone wove through the air its notes, a reminder of the night she'd danced with Thunder, a moment that felt like another lifetime. She passed a mural in Williamsburg, its vibrant colors depicting a woman cradling 3 stars, and felt a surge of resolve. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered to her unborn sons, her hand resting on her belly. "And for me." As winter approached, Lyra's life took on a rhythm of quiet strength. She saved every penny from her Etsy sales, dreaming of a day when Lyra's loom would be a storefront in Brooklyn, a legacy for her children. Joyce's family became her foundation, their love a shield against the uncertainties ahead. But in the quiet moments when the city slept and her journal lay open, Lyra couldn't shake the image of Thunder's eyes, the way they'd held hers in that fleeting, reckless night. She didn't know if she wanted him to return, but she knew one thing: she would be enough for herself and her sons, no matter the future. The spring sun bathed Times Square in a golden glow. Its frenetic energy, a living pulse, mirrored New York City's heartbeat. Lyra Thompson, now a radiant figure at 30, stood amid the chaos, her auburn curls catching the light as she watched her triplet sons, Leo, Lyndon, and Lorenzo, marvel at the towering billboards and street performers. At 3 years old, the boys were a vibrant constellation of curiosity, their dark eyes wide with wonder, their laughter a melody that softened the city's clamor. Lyra's heart swelled as she held their small hands, her silk scarf, a design from her thriving Lyra's loom, fluttering in the breeze. This outing was a rare treat, a moment to weave joy into their lives, despite the weight she carried as a single mother. Her life in Brooklyn had blossomed into a tapestry of resilience and love. Lyra's loom, her Etsy shop turned burgeoning brand, had transformed her modest apartment into a hub of creativity, its walls adorned with woven art that told stories of her heritage. She had left her bookstore job, her days now filled with fulfilling orders and dreaming of a Dumbo boutique. Yet the absence of Thunder James Whitmore, the man whose fleeting touch had given her these boys, lingered like a shadow. His business card, worn but untouched, remained in her journal, a relic of a night she had tried to bury but couldn't forget. The boys tugged at her hands, pulling her toward a kids' play area near the TKTS booth, a colorful maze of slides and climbing nets. "Mommy, can we play?" Leo asked, his voice bright with anticipation. Lyndon and Lorenzo echoed his plea, their identical smiles tugging at Lyra's heart. "Go on, my loves," she said, kneeling to adjust Lorenzo's tiny sneakers. "Stay together, okay? I'll be right here." As they scampered off, Lyra settled on a nearby bench, her phone buzzing with a message from Joyce, her best friend, checking in on their day. She began typing a reply, her focus drifting, until a familiar voice shattered the moment. "Nice day for an adventure." The warm and resonant words sent a jolt through Lyra's veins. She looked up, her breath catching, as her eyes met a pair of piercing blue ones she hadn't seen in 4 years. Thunder stood before her, his blonde hair slightly longer, his tailored jacket accentuating a frame that had grown leaner, more weathered. He was a vision from her past, a storm she thought she'd outrun. Her heart raced, a mix of fury and longing surging within her. "Thunder," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the city's din. He smiled, a hesitant curve of his lips holding warmth and regret. "Lyra," he said, his tone soft, as if testing the weight of her name. "I didn't expect to see you here." His gaze flicked to the play area where the boys laughed, oblivious to the seismic shift unfolding. Lyra stood, her arms crossing instinctively, a shield against the memories flooding back their dance-reckless night, the silence that followed. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp, betraying the hurt she'd buried. Before Thunder could answer, Leo's voice rang out. "Mommy, look at me." Lyra turned, her eyes softening as she watched her son slide down a colorful tube. But the boys had noticed Thunder, their curiosity drawing them closer. Lorenzo, ever the boldest, approached, his small hand tugging at Thunder's sleeve. "Hi, mister," he said, his grin infectious. "Want to play with us? Mommy's busy." Lyndon and Leo joined him, their eyes studying Thunder with an innocent trust that tightened Lyra's chest. Thunder knelt to their level, his expression softening in a way that stirred something deep within Lyra. "Sure, little man," he said, ruffling Lorenzo's curls. "What's the game?" The boys cheered, pulling him toward the play area, their chatter filling the air. Lyra watched frozen as Thunder engaged with her sons, his laughter blending with theirs. There was a familiarity in his movements, a gentleness that echoed the man she'd met 4 years ago, and a new depth, as if time had carved something softer into his edges. She followed her steps, heavy with a storm of emotions. "Boys, come back," she called, her voice sharper than intended. They paused, looking between her and Thunder, confused by her tone. Thunder stood, his eyes meeting hers, searching. "Lyra, can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading. She shook her head, her hands trembling as she gathered the boys. "We're leaving," she said, her words clipped. Say goodbye." "But Mommy, he's fun." Leo protested, his brow furrowing. Lyra's heart ached, but the sight of Thunder so close to her sons, so unaware of their connection, felt like a betrayal of the life she'd built. She turned, guiding the boys away, their protests fading into the crowd. Thunder called after her. "Lyra, please. Just a moment." His voice held a desperation that made her pause, her back to him, her resolve wavering. She turned, her eyes blazing. "What do you want?" "Thunder, you disappeared. You don't get to walk back into my life like nothing happened." Her words were a blade cutting through the air between them. Thunder stepped closer, his hands raised in surrender. "I didn't disappear," he said, his voice steady, but laced with pain. "I was in an accident, Lyra. I need you to hear me out." The boys tugged at her hands, sensing the tension. Lyra knelt, forcing a smile. "Play for a few more minutes. Stay where I can see you." They nodded, scampering back to the slides, leaving Lyra and Thunder in a fragile bubble amidst the chaos of Times Square. She crossed her arms, her gaze hard. "You've got 5 minutes," she said, her voice a challenge. "Make it count." Thunder took a breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "After that night, I was in a car accident, a bad one. I was in a coma for 2 years, Lyra. I didn't even know who I was when I woke up for a while. Your name, it was the first thing I remembered. I tried to find you, but I had nothing to go on. No number, no address. Just a memory of you dancing in that bar." His voice cracked, and Lyra felt a pang in her chest, a crack in the wall she'd built. She wanted to believe him, but the years of raising her sons alone, of answering their questions with lies, held her back. "You left me a card," she said, her voice trembling. "I called Thunder, over and over. You never answered." His face fell, his hands clenching. "My phone was with my parents. I didn't get it back until I was out of the hospital. By then you were gone." Lyra's eyes stung, the weight of his words battling the anger she'd nursed for years. She looked at her sons, their laughter, a beacon in the distance, and felt a surge of protectiveness. "Those boys," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're yours, Thunder, but you don't get to claim them just because you're here now." His eyes widened, a mix of shock and awe, as he followed her gaze to the play area. "Mine," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. She nodded, her throat tight. "I've raised them alone. They don't know you. I don't know if I can trust you to be in their lives." Thunder's face crumpled, but he nodded, respecting her boundary. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight," he said, "but I want to try, Lyra, for them, for you." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a new business card, his name gleaming in gold. "This is me now. Call if you change your mind." Lyra took the card, her fingers brushing his, a spark igniting where their skin met. She turned away, calling to the boys, her heart a storm of hope and fear. As they left Times Square, the city's lights fading behind them, Lyra felt the weight of Thunder's presence lingering, a promise of a future she wasn't ready to embrace, but couldn't entirely dismiss. The Brooklyn sky was a canvas of twilight, its purples and golds painting a backdrop to Lyra Thompson's restless heart. A week had passed since her unexpected reunion with Thunder in Times Square, and the memory of his blue eyes, haunted, yet hopeful, clung to her like the scent of rain. In her Bed-Stuy apartment, Lyra sat at her weaving loom, her fingers threading vibrant threads into a tapestry that echoed her heritage, each knot a meditation on the choice before her. Her sons, Leo Linden and Lorenzo, slept in their room, their soft breaths a lullaby that grounded her. Yet Thunder's new business card, now tucked beside the old one in her journal, was a silent challenge, daring her to bridge the chasm of their past. Lyra's life had been a fortress of her own making, built on the love for her boys and the success of Lyra's loom. Her designs, now sold in boutiques across Brooklyn and Manhattan, had earned her a feature in a local art magazine, her story of single motherhood and creativity inspiring others. But Thunder's return threatened to unravel the careful threads of her world. She had spent years convincing herself she didn't need him, that her sons were enough. Yet his words in Times Square, his confession of a coma, his search for her had stirred a longing she thought she'd buried. The following Saturday, Lyra took the boys to Prospect Park, their favorite weekend ritual. The spring air was alive with the scent of blooming lilacs, and the boys ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the meadow. Lyra settled on a blanket, her journal open, when a shadow fell across the page. She looked up to find Thunder, his presence both startling and inevitable. He wore a simple sweater, his blonde hair catching the sunlight, and his smile was tentative, as if he knew he was trespassing on sacred ground. He said, "I didn't mean to intrude," his voice low, carrying the warmth of a hearth. "I was jogging and saw you. I couldn't walk away." Lyra's heart thudded, her instincts warring between pushing him away and letting him stay. "You're making a habit of showing up uninvited," she said, her tone sharp but softened by the curiosity in her eyes. The boys noticed him, their faces lighting up. "It's the fun, Mr." Lorenzo shouted, running over Leo and Lyndon close behind. Thunder knelt, his grin genuine, as he high-fived each boy. "Hey, champs," he said, pulling a small soccer ball from his bag. "Want to kick this around?" The boys cheered, dragging him to the grass, their energy infectious. Lyra watched, her arms crossed, as Thunder played with her sons, his laughter mingling with theirs. There was a tenderness in his movements, a natural ease that made her chest ache. He didn't know they were his yet. He treated them with a care that felt like instinct. After an hour, the boys collapsed on the blanket, breathless and happy. Thunder sat nearby, his gaze meeting Lyra's. "They're incredible," he said, his voice thick with awe. "You've done something amazing, Lyra." She nodded, her throat tight, unsure whether to trust the warmth in his words. "They're my world," she said. "I don't let just anyone into it." Thunder leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes earnest. "I know I don't deserve a place in it yet, but I want to earn it. I've spent the last year rebuilding my life after the accident. I'm not the man I was that night, reckless, broken. I want to be someone they can look up to." His vulnerability disarmed her, but Lyra held her ground. "Words are easy, Thunder," she said. "Please show me." He took her challenge, appearing at her apartment the next week, with a picnic basket, inviting the boys to Coney Island. Lyra agreed, her curiosity outweighing her caution. Thunder pushed the boys on swings at the boardwalk, his laughter blending with the ocean's roar. He bought them cotton candy, their sticky fingers leaving marks on his sweater, and told them stories of his childhood in Connecticut, of building forts in his mother's garden. Lyra watched, her heart softening as she saw her son's joy. But the fear of his impermanence lingered. One evening, when Leo fell ill with a fever, Thunder showed up at the hospital, unasked but steady. He stayed through the night, bringing coffee for Lyra, and reading to Leo in a soft voice. "You didn't have to come," Lyra said, her voice weary, as they sat in the waiting room. Thunder met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "I wanted to," he said. "I know what it's like to feel alone in a storm. I don't want you to feel that way." His consistency began to chip away at her defenses. They met weekly park playdates, ice cream runs in Dumbo, a trip to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, where Thunder taught the boys to name flowers. Each encounter revealed a new facet of him, the entrepreneur who had rebuilt his tech startup, the son who called his mother daily, the man who carried guilt for a night he couldn't fully recall. Lyra's journal is filled with new entries, her words grappling with the shift in her heart. "He's trying," she wrote. "But what if he leaves again? What if I let him in and it breaks us?" The cultural divide between them added a layer of complexity. Lyra, a black woman from Brooklyn, had faced the world's judgments her whole life, her strength forged in resilience. Thunder, a white man from privilege, moved through the world with an ease she envied but couldn't share. At a community festival in Bed-Stuy, where Lyra's designs were showcased, she noticed the curious glances at Thunder and the unspoken questions about their connection. "People will talk," she told him later, her voice quiet. "They'll see a white man with a black woman and her kids and make assumptions." Thunder's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "Let them talk. I'm here for you and those boys, not for their approval." His fierce yet straightforward words stirred something in Lyra, a hope she hadn't dared entertain. She began to see him not as the man who had left, but as one who was choosing to stay step by careful step. One evening, as they walked along the Brooklyn promenade, the city skyline glittering across the river, Thunder stopped, his hand brushing hers. Lyra said, his voice a soft plea. "I know I can't undo the past, but I'm here now, and want to be their father if you'll let me." The boys ran ahead, chasing fireflies, unaware of the weight of his words. Lyra's heart pounded, torn between fear and fragile hope. She looked into his eyes, searching for the man she'd danced with, the one who had promised to find her and failed. "I need time," she said finally, her voice trembling with the weight of her trust. "They're my everything, Thunder. If you hurt them, I'll never forgive you." He nodded, his hand squeezing hers gently, a promise unspoken. As they continued walking, the boys' laughter echoing in the dusk, Lyra felt a shift, a bridge forming between their past and a future she couldn't yet see, but was beginning to imagine. The summer air in Brooklyn smelled of blooming jasmine, a whisper of possibility wading through the streets like a lover's promise. Lyra Thompson stood on the edge of her life's delicate balance, her heart a canvas painted with the vibrant hues of motherhood and the muted shades of a past she was learning to forgive. In her Bed-Stuy apartment, the walls glowed with her woven art, each testament to her resilience and the success of Lyra's loom. Her triplet sons Leo, Lyndon, and Lorenzo filled the space with laughter, their 4-year-old energy a whirlwind that anchored her to the present. Yet, once a distant memory, Thunder James Whitmore's presence now rippled through her days, a tide pulling her toward an uncertain shore. Since their reunion in Times Square, Thunder had become a quiet constant. His efforts to bridge the gap between them were marked by a sincerity that warmed and unnerved Lyra. He appeared at Prospect Park playdates, his blonde hair catching the sun as he kicked a soccer ball with the boys, their giggles a melody that softened her defenses. He brought ice cream to their Dumbo outings, his stories of childhood forts in Connecticut, sparking wonder in their eyes. When Leo fell ill, Thunder's vigil at the hospital cracked the armor around Lyra's heart, and his steady presence was a reminder that he was no longer the reckless man of that Manhattan night. This morning, as sunlight filtered through the apartment's windows, Lyra sat at her loom, her fingers threading crimson and gold into a tapestry inspired by her grandmother's stories of resilience. The boys played nearby, their toy cars racing across the rug when a knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Thunder, his blue eyes bright with a nervous energy, a basket of pastries in his hands. "I thought you and the boys might like breakfast," he said, his voice a warm caress. "There's a new bakery in Williamsburg, croissants, muffins, the works." Lyra hesitated, her instinct to guard her space warring with the pull of his gesture. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said, her tone softer than she intended. Thunder's smile was gentle, disarming. "I want to, Lyra. Not because I have to, but because it feels right." Sensing a treat, the boys rushed over, their cheers breaking the tension. "Mr. Thunder!" Lorenzo shouted, hugging his legs. Lyra stepped aside, her heart, a tangle of caution and curiosity, letting him in. They sat at the kitchen table, the boys devouring chocolate croissants, their faces smudged with delight. Thunder watched them, his expression a mix of awe and longing. And Lyra caught the way his gaze lingered on Leo's curls, so like her own, and Lyndon's thoughtful eyes, a mirror of his own. "They're growing so fast," he said quietly, his voice thick. "I wish I'd been there from the start." Lyra's chest tightened, the weight of his absence a shadow between them. "You weren't," she said, her words measured. "But you're here now. That's what matters." Thunder's visits became a rhythm in their lives. He joined them for Sunday brunches at a Bed-Stuy cafe where the boys climbed onto his lap demanding stories. He taught Lorenzo to ride a tricycle in the park, his hands steady as he guided the wobbly wheels. At a Brooklyn street fair, he helped Lyra set up a booth for Lyra's loom, and his admiration for her designs was evident as he traced the intricate patterns. "You're building something incredible," he told her, his voice low, meant only for her, not just for them, but for you. Lyra's cheeks warmed, his words stirring a pride she rarely allowed herself to feel. Yet the cultural divide between them cast a subtle shadow. Lyra, a black woman who had navigated Brooklyn's complexities with grit and grace, felt the weight of curious glances when they were together. At the street fair, a vendor's raised eyebrow, as Thunder helped her unpack scarves, spoke volumes. In a park, a passerby's comment, "Nice of you to help," assumed he was a volunteer, not a father. Lyra bore these moments with quiet dignity, but they gnawed at her, a reminder of the world's quick judgments. Thunder noticed his jaw tightening, but he never shied away. "I don't care what they think," he said one evening, his hand brushing hers as they walked along the East River. "I'm here for you and those boys." His words were a balm, but Lyra's heart remained guarded. She wrote in her journal late at night, her thoughts a dance of hope and fear. "He's trying so hard." She penned the moonlight casting shadows on the page. "But what if this is temporary? What if he tires of us, of me? I've built a life without him, but his presence makes me want more. A family, a partner. I'm scared to hope." The boy's growing attachment to Thunder only deepened her conflict. Leo began calling him Mr. T, his eyes bright with trust. Lyndon drew pictures of their park adventures, Thunder's stick figure towering protectively. Lorenzo, ever bold, asked, "Can Mr. T stay forever?" Lyra's smile faltered, and her answer was soft. "We'll see, baby." One humid July evening, Thunder invited them to Coney Island, the boardwalk alive with the scent of salt water and fried dough. The boys rode the carousel, their laughter mingling with the organ's tune, while Lyra and Thunder sat on a bench, the ocean's rhythm a backdrop to their silence. "I want to tell them," Thunder said suddenly, his voice steady but vulnerable, "that I'm their father. I know it's your call, Lyra, but I need them to know." His eyes, bright with longing, held hers, and she felt the weight of his request like a stone in her chest. She looked at her sons, their joy a beacon, and shook her head. "Not yet," she said, her voice trembling. "They're happy, Thunder. They don't need to know the pain of those years without you. Give me time to trust this, to trust you." He nodded, his hand finding hers, his touch a quiet promise. "I'll wait," he said, "as long as it takes." The sincerity in his voice stirred something profound within her, a flicker of the connection they'd shared in that Manhattan bar, now tempered by time and intention. Their outings grew more intimate, a slow weaving of their lives. At a Brooklyn Botanic Garden picnic, Thunder brought a kite, its bright tail dancing in the sky as the boys chased it. Lyra laughed, her guard slipping, as she ran alongside them, her scarf fluttering like a flag of surrender. Thunder caught her hand, pulling her close, his breath warm against her ear. "You're beautiful when you laugh," he whispered, and for a moment the world was just them, the kite and the promise of something more. But doubt lingered, a quiet undercurrent. Lyra's mother, Evelyn, remained distant in Harlem, unaware of the boys or Thunder's return. Lyra feared her judgment, her voice echoing, "You're better than your mistakes." Telling Evelyn meant confronting that past, and Lyra wasn't ready. She wrote in her journal, her words, a prayer. "He's building a bridge to us. But what if it collapses? I want to believe in him, but my boys deserve more than promises." As summer faded, Thunder invited them to a rooftop jazz concert in Dumbo. The city skyline, a glittering backdrop. The boys danced to the saxophone's wail, their joy infectious, while Lyra and Thunder sat close, their shoulders brushing. "I'm falling for you," he said, his voice barely audible over the music. "Not just because of them, but because of you, the woman you've become." Lyra's breath caught her heart, a storm of hope and fear. She didn't respond, but her hand lingered in his, a silent acknowledgement that she too was falling slowly, carefully, but undeniably. Autumn's amber light draped Brooklyn in a warm embrace, its glow mirroring the cautious hope blooming in Lyra Thompson's heart. The city's rhythm pulsed through her Bed-Stuy apartment, where her triplet sons, Leo Linden and Lorenzo's laughter wove a melody of love and resilience. At 4, they were a vibrant force, their curls bouncing as they played their questions about Mr. T growing sharper. Lyra's life anchored by Lyra's loom, and the boys' unwavering love had found a new cadence with Thunder James Whitmore's presence, his steady efforts to earn her trust a thread, stitching their past to a possible future. Thunder had become a fixture in their world, and his visits were a tapestry of small, meaningful moments. He taught Leo to tie his shoes, and his patience was a quiet vow. He read to Linden, his voice bringing stories to life, and chased Lorenzo through Prospect Park, their laughter a bridge across the years of absence. Lyra watched her heart softening with each gesture, though the shadow of their cultural divide lingered. As a black woman from Brooklyn, she carried the weight of a world that often judged her. Thunder, a white man from privilege, moved through it with an ease she both envied and resented. Yet his commitment to her and the boys was undeniable, a beacon in her storm. One crisp October morning, Thunder arrived at her apartment, his blue eyes bright with a nervous excitement. "I want you and the boys to meet my family," he said, his voice blending hope and apprehension. "My parents have a place in Greenwich, Connecticut for the weekend. No pressure." Lyra's stomach nodded, and the invitation was a leap she wasn't sure she was ready for. Meeting his family meant confronting not just their past, but the differences in their worlds, her Brooklyn roots against his affluent upbringing. "Why now?" she asked, her tone guarded. Thunder's hand grazed hers, his touch a spark. "Because you're my family. Lyra, you and the boys. I want my parents to see that." His sincerity disarmed her, and after a moment she nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice soft. "But if it's too much, we leave." The boys, overhearing, cheered their excitement, a tide pulling her forward. The drive to Greenwich was a journey through time, the city's concrete giving way to rolling hills and manicured estates. The boys pressed their faces to the car windows, marveling at the sprawling lawns. Thunder's family home, a colonial mansion with ivy-clad walls, loomed like a vision from another world. Lyra's heart raced as they stepped inside, the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers enveloping them. Thunder's parents, Margaret and Henry Whitmore, greeted them, their smiles polite, but tinged with curiosity. Margaret, a poised woman with silver-streaked hair, studied Lyra with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You must be Lyra," she said, her voice warm but measured. "Thunder's told us so much." Henry, a retired lawyer with a kind but reserved demeanor, shook her hand, his eyes flicking to the boys. "They're spirited," he said, a smile breaking through. The boys, oblivious to the tension, ran to explore the garden, their laughter echoing through the house. Dinner was a delicate dance. Margaret's questions about Lyra's business and her upbringing in Brooklyn, felt like a test, her tone probing. Lyra answered gracefully, her pride in Lyra's loom and her sons shining through. She said, "I've built a life for them," her voice steady. "They're my heart, and I'll do anything to protect them." Thunder's hand found hers under the table, a silent anchor. But Margaret's next question cut deep. "And their father?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Thunder mentioned an unconventional beginning. Lyra's breath caught, and the room suddenly became small. She felt the weight of judgment, the unspoken assumptions about her as a black single mother. Before she could respond, Thunder spoke, his voice firm. "Mom, Lyra's raised our sons alone because I wasn't there. That's on me, not her. She's extraordinary." His fierce and unyielding defense stirred a warmth in Lyra's chest, but Margaret's silence spoke volumes. Later, as the boys played in the garden, Lyra confronted Margaret on the terrace, the Connecticut stars above them, a stark contrast to Brooklyn's neon. "I know what you're thinking," Lyra said, her voice low but resolute, "that I'm not what you pictured for your son. But I've fought for my boys, for myself. I don't need your approval, but I won't let you judge them." Margaret's expression softened, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "I misjudged you," she admitted. "You're a mother who'd move mountains. My grandsons are lucky." The weekend shifted after that. Henry taught the boys to fish in a nearby pond, his laughter blending with theirs. Margaret showed Lyra her rose garden, and their conversation turned to shared love of art and resilience. By Sunday, the boys called them Nana and Pop, their acceptance bridging the divide. Thunder watched his relief palpable, and Lyra felt a shift, a sense that this family, however different, might become hers. Back in Brooklyn, the weekend lingered in Lyra's heart. She wrote in her journal that her words were a dance of hope. They welcomed us not just as guests, but as family. Thunder fought for us, and I saw the man he's become. But I'm still scared of losing myself, of the world's eyes on us. The cultural divide remained a quiet tension. At a Bed-Stuy community event where Lyra's designs were celebrated, whispers followed Thunder's presence, a reminder of their differences. Yet he stayed, his hand in hers, his commitment unwavering. One evening, as they walked through Fort Greene Park, the boys asleep in their stroller, Thunder stopped, his eyes bright with a question he'd held too long. "Lyra," he said, his voice a soft vow, "I love you. Not just because of the boys, but because you're the strongest, most beautiful woman I know. Will you let me build a life with you?" He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple band with a sapphire that caught the moonlight, a promise as deep as the ocean. Lyra's breath hitched, her heart a storm of joy and fear. She looked at her sons, their peaceful faces, a reminder of all she'd fought for, and then at Thunder, his eyes holding a love she couldn't deny. "I'm not saying yes," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. "Not yet, but I'm not saying no. Keep showing me, Thunder. Show me we can be a family." He nodded, slipping the ring back into his pocket, his smile a beacon in the dusk. As they walked on the city's lights shimmering, Lyra felt the possibility of a future where love could heal the wounds of the past. The autumn breeze in Brooklyn carried a whisper of change, its cool touch a caress against Lyra Thompson's skin as she stood on the precipice of a new chapter. Her Bed-Stuy apartment, a sanctuary woven with the vibrant threads of Lyra's loom, hummed with the quiet joy of her triplet sons, Leo, Lyndon, and Lorenzo, whose laughter filled the air like a melody of hope. At 4, they were a constellation of light in her world, their dark curls and bright eyes a mirror of her resilience. Yet Thunder James Whitmore's presence, once a storm that had upended her life, now felt like a steady tide pulling her toward a future she was beginning to embrace. Since Thunder's proposal in Fort Greene Park, Lyra's heart had been a battlefield of hope and hesitation. His sapphire ring offered under the twilight remained in its velvet box, a promise she hadn't yet accepted, but couldn't bear to reject. His commitment to her and the boys had grown undeniable through park playdates, hospital vigils, and a weekend in Greenwich that had bridged their worlds. Yet the weight of their past and the cultural chasm between her Brooklyn roots and his privileged upbringing held her back. She wanted to trust him to believe in the man who had knelt before her, but fear lingered like a shadow in her heart. One golden October afternoon, Lyra took the boys to Central Park, a rare escape from the city's pulse. The park was a canvas of amber and crimson, its paths strewn with leaves that crunched underfoot. The boys ran ahead, chasing a bright red kite Thunder had given them, their laughter echoing through the great lawn. Lyra spread a blanket, her journal open in her lap, when Thunder appeared, his blonde hair catching the sunlight, his smile a beacon that warmed her. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, settling beside her, a picnic basket in hand. "I brought sandwiches, turkey, and avocado, your favorite." Lyra's lips curved, her guard softening at his thoughtfulness. "You're spoiling us," she said, her voice a blend of teasing and gratitude. The boys, spotting him, rushed over their arms, wrapping around him in a chorus of "Mr. T." Thunder laughed, pulling them into a bear hug, his ease with them a quiet vow. They ate together, the boys smearing mustard on their cheeks, while Lyra watched, her heart swelling at the sight of this makeshift family. As the sun dipped lower, Thunder suggested a walk to the Bethesda fountain, its angel statue gleaming in the fading light. The boys skipped ahead, tossing pebbles into the water, while Lyra and Thunder lagged, their steps slow, their silence heavy with unspoken words. "I've been thinking about what you said." Lyra began, her voice soft as the breeze, about building a life together. "It scares me, Thunder. Not because I don't care, but because I do too much." He stopped, turning to face her, his blue eyes searching hers. "I know I've got a lot to prove," he said, his voice a low, earnest melody. "I lost you once, because of a night we couldn't control, and then an accident that stole years from us. But every moment with you and the boys feels like a gift I don't deserve. I want to earn it, Lyra, for all of us." His hand found hers, his touch a spark that ignited a warmth she couldn't ignore. Lyra looked at the fountain, its waters reflecting the sky, and felt a shift within her. "I need you to understand something," she said, her voice steady but vulnerable. "I'm not just a mother or a businesswoman. I'm a black woman who's fought for everything I have. The world looks at us, you and me, and sees differences. I need to know you're ready for that, for the whispers, the stares, the weight of it all." Thunder's jaw tightened, but his gaze never wavered. He said, "I see you, Lyra, not as a label, but as the woman who made me want to improve. I'll face whatever comes, as long as it's with you." His fierce and tender words cracked the final wall around her heart. She reached into her bag, pulling out the velvet box, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The sapphire gleamed, a promise as deep as the ocean. "I'm saying yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not just for the boys, but for me, for us." Thunder's eyes widened, a mix of shock and joy, and he pulled her into his arms, his lips brushing her forehead in a kiss that felt like a vow. Sensing the moment, the boys ran back their cheers, a symphony that sealed the moment. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of planning. Lyra and Thunder decided on a spring wedding in Harlem, a nod to her roots, a celebration of their shared future. They met with a planner at a cozy cafe in Bed-Stuy, their hands entwined as they discussed flowers and music. Lyra chose a dress inspired by her designs, its fabric woven with kente patterns, a tribute to her heritage. Thunder, ever supportive, insisted on incorporating her art into the ceremony, suggesting a canopy of her woven tapestries. "It's your story," he told her, his voice warm. "I want the world to see it." But the shadow of Lyra's mother Evelyn loomed large. Lyra had yet to tell her about the boys, or Thunder, her fear of judgment, a chain she hadn't broken. One evening, as she and Thunder sat in her apartment, the boys asleep, she opened her journal, her words spilling out. She wrote that, "I'm ready to love you, but I'm terrified of facing my mother. She raised me to be unbreakable. But this feels like a fracture. She won't forgive." Thunder, reading over her shoulder, squeezed her hand. "We'll face her together," he said. "You're not alone anymore." Their first step was visiting Harlem. Lyra's childhood home, a modest brownstone steeped in memories. Evelyn greeted them, her eyes sharp, her embrace stiff. Unaware of the tension, the boys charmed her with their chatter, their drawings of Nana winning her smile. Over dinner, Lyra took a breath, her voice trembling, as she told the truth about the night with Thunder, the boys, their love. Evelyn's silence was a storm, but her eyes softened as she looked at her grandsons. "You should have told me," she said, her voice thick. "But they're beautiful, Lyra, and so are you." The words, simple but profound, were a release, a bridge to healing. Lyra and Thunder grew closer as winter approached, their love a quiet fire. They spent evenings planning, laughing over the boys' antics, stealing kisses under Brooklyn's streetlights. Lyra's journal is filled with hope. Her words are a love letter to their future. "I'm choosing you," she wrote, "not because you're perfect, but because you're mine." With its endless possibilities, the city seemed to hum in agreement, its lights promising the life they would build together. Spring unfurled over Harlem like a love song, its blossoms painting the streets in hues of pink and white, a fitting prelude to the day Lyra Thompson would step into forever. Her Bed-Stuy apartment, once a sanctuary of survival, now buzzed with anticipation, its walls adorned with the woven art of Lyra's loom, each piece a thread in the tapestry of her journey. Her triplet sons, Leo, Lyndon, and Lorenzo, danced around her, their bow ties slightly askew, their laughter a melody that anchored her heart. At 4, they were her stars, their bright eyes reflecting the love that had carried her through years of solitude to this moment, a wedding to Thunder James Whitmore, the man who had turned a reckless night into a promise of eternity. The past months had been a dance of love and reconciliation. Lyra's acceptance of Thunder's proposal had opened a door to a future she had once feared to imagine. Their planning had been a labor of love, each decision a brushstroke on their shared canvas. They chose a historic church in Harlem, its stained glass windows casting rainbows over pews filled with family and friends. Lyra's dress, a masterpiece of her own design, wove kente patterns with ivory silk, a tribute to her heritage and strength. Thunder, in a tailored suit, had insisted on a canopy of her tapestries, a symbol of their union rooted in her art. The morning of the wedding dawned with a gentle rain, its patter a soft serenade as Lyra stood before her mirror, her auburn curls cascading over her shoulders. Joyce, her best friend and maid of honor, adjusted her veil, her eyes shimmering with tears. "You're a vision, Lyra," she said, her voice thick with pride. "You've built this life and are now sharing it with him. I'm so proud." Lyra squeezed her hand, her heart full. Joyce's family. Marla and David had been her rock, their queen's brownstone a haven through her years as a single mother. Today they sat in the front pew, their smiles a testament to their unwavering love. The church had guests, blending Brooklyn's vibrancy and Greenwich's elegance. Thunder's parents, Margaret and Henry, had embraced Lyra and the boys, their initial reservations giving way to warmth. Lyra's mother, Evelyn, was there too, and her presence was a miracle after their tearful reconciliation in Harlem. Evelyn had held her grandsons, her stern facade crumbling, as she whispered apologies for years of distance. "You're my daughter," she had said, her voice breaking. "And I'm proud of the woman you've become." Those words etched in Lyra's heart gave her the courage to walk down the aisle. As the organ swelled, Lyra stepped forward, the boys at her side, their small hands clutching hers. Leo, the leader, beamed with pride. Lyndon, the thinker, clutched a drawing he'd made for Mr. T. Lorenzo, the mischief maker, winked at the crowd. Thunder stood at the altar, his blue eyes glistening, his smile a beacon that drew her in. The vows they exchanged were a symphony of promises. Thunder's voice steady as he pledged to love her through every storm, Lyra's trembling as she vowed to trust him with her heart. The church erupted in applause when they kissed, the boys cheering loudly. The reception, held in a Harlem ballroom, celebrated their worlds colliding. Jazz filled the air, its notes weaving through tables adorned with Lyra's tapestries. The boys danced with Margaret, their nana, while Henry spun Evelyn across the floor, their laughter bridging their differences. Lyra and Thunder moved together, their steps, a dance of joy. Their love, a quiet fire that burned brighter than the city's lights. "I never thought I'd find you again," Thunder whispered, his lips brushing her ear. "But I'd search forever if I had to." Lyra smiled, her heart soaring. "You found us," she said, "and we're home." Their new life began in a Brooklyn townhouse, a gift from Thunder's parents, its rooms filled with Lyra's art and the boys' toys. Lyra's business flourished, her Dumbo boutique, now a reality, its shelves lined with designs that told her story. Thunder, a partner in every sense, helped manage the finances. His tech expertise complemented her creativity. They navigated the challenges of their blended worlds, whispers at school events, curious glances in Greenwich with a united front. Their love a shield against the world's judgments. The boys, now aware that Thunder was their father, thrived in his presence. He taught them to code simple games, his laughter blending with theirs as they built digital worlds. Lyra watched, her heart full, her journal now, a chronicle of joy. "We're a family," she wrote one night, the moonlight streaming through their window. "Not perfect, but ours. I've learned to love without fear, to trust without doubt. This is our forever." One evening, as they sat on their stoop, the boys chasing fireflies in the yard, Lyra leaned against Thunder, his arm around her. The city hummed around them, its pulse a reminder of the night that had changed everything. "I love you," she said, her voice a soft vow. Thunder kissed her temple, his breath warm. "And I love you, Lyra. Always." The stars above Brooklyn twinkled, a constellation of their journey, and Lyra knew that their love, forged in fire and tempered by time, would light their way forever. Dear reader, Lyra and Thunder's journey reminds us that love can bloom from the ashes of mistakes, and that family is built on trust and resilience. Have you found love in unexpected places? Please share your story with us at lyrisloomstories.com, where we celebrate the threads that weave us together. Join our community, inspire others, and let your heart's tale be heard.